Throughout history, humanity has used various means to transmit and preserve the knowledge acquired. In the Hispanic Digital Library, we can find many works that illustrate us about this evolution. At first, the transmission of information was only oral and only remained in the memory of people who received it, and in turn could also transmit. But the human race needed to fix that information and make it could transcend space and time. The cave paintings are a good example of this human need to transmit and fix knowledge, as well as the symbols on the walls of the caves, which date back to about 35,000 years in the so-called proto-writing. Probably the first book in history was a Mesopotamian book written by the Sumerians more than 3,500 years ago. The Mesopotamian books consisted of 40-centimeter clay tablets. Papyri, on the other hand, were the first documents to contain illustrations. To protect them, they were kept rolled up in mud tubs, wooden boxes, or leather cases. Despite its high cost and fragility, papyrus was used for 3,000 years. The Hispanic Digital Library has digitized and made available to users the Papyrus of Ezekiel, dated between the 2nd and 3rd centuries. We are referring to the oldest manuscript preserved in the National Library of Spain, an exceptional document for its antiquity, as it contains the most primitive text and closest to the original Greek Bible. We can also find the Codex of Metz, a medieval compilation of treatises on computation and astronomy. During the first millennium BC, the parchment was discovered, a substitute for papyrus during the Middle Ages. The parchment was made from calf, sheep, or goat skins tanned with lime. The use of parchment led to the creation of the codex, the predecessor of the book, which consisted of several folded and stitched parchments imitating the shape of ancient clay tablets. The term is commonly used for handwritten books in the run-up to printing. In the Hispanic Digital Library, we can consult the Codex of Fernando and Doña Sancha, the most luxurious illuminated medieval manuscript in the Spanish National Library. It contains the Apocalypse of St. John and the comments on this text written in the 8th century by the Blessed of Liébana. During the Middle Ages, the Christian monasteries became centers of literary production and the place where illuminated manuscripts were born. These books were handwritten and decorated with gold, silver, and bright colors, as well as decorated capital letters and small illustrations. The National Library has parchment masterpieces such as Petrarch's poetic work, Liber de Laudibus Sanctae Crucis, or Battista Agnesi's Atlas, considered works of art for their perfection and beauty. We cannot fail to mention the Book of Hours by Charles VIII, King of France. The most spectacular book of hours in the library is decorated to the highest standard and is catalogued as Spain's treasure. Also noteworthy is the Toledo Codex Etymologies of San Isidoro, which takes its name from the teaching procedure it uses, and we could consider it a kind of encyclopedia of the knowledge of that period. The use of paper has been one of the decisive factors in the history of the world. Along with the invention of the printing press, paper was discovered in China. Of vegetable origin, it was made mainly from cellulose and other plant elements. It was the Arabs who introduced paper in Spain in the 11th century, with Játiva being the place referred to in its first allusions to Spanish paper in 1154. Another masterpiece kept in the National Library is La Biblia Pauperum, or Of the Poor, a 15th century woodcut incunabula that shows how the evangelizing zeal was aware of the new technologies of writing. The illustrations and simple phrases that make it up are made using a printing technique based on wooden planks. The invention of the printing press in the 1450s was a radical change. Johann Gutenberg created the movable lead types and prepared them for integration into a modified grape press, turning it into a primitive printing press. These movable elements, which showed the inverted face of the letter, constituted the surface that would receive the ink and form the impression on the paper. One of the first works to come out of the Gutenberg press was the Bible, printed in Gothic type with a double column and 42 lines per page. All books printed with moving type before the 1st of January 1501 were called incunabula. The National Library has the most important collection in the country, where the main Spanish printers and most of the European printers are represented. A good example is Ramon Sabunde's masterpiece Theologia Naturalis, where he tries to reconcile reason and faith, and which will exert a great influence during the 15th and 16th centuries. Other incunabula that stand out are Las Obras de Mosén Pedro de Valera, an important source of knowledge for the reigns of the last Trastarmas, or La Divina Commedia by Dante, written in Gothic script and with more than 600 pages. With the Industrial Revolution, the first modern techniques appeared in the 19th century, such as lithography and, shortly after, the rotary press. It was at the beginning of the 20th century when the printing technique reached its peak with offset printing, which is what is used today.